I wanted to start out by just introducing the first question, which is, what is the business case for hiring persons with disabilities? And I wanted to just start out with a personal perspective. So I think people with disabilities bring diverse perspectives to the workplace. Right now, I am the only person with a disability that I know of in my workplace, and I'm the only woman of color. And like I said, I'm a disability rights staff attorney. Like the intro said, I'm a disability rights staff attorney at the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. And before I started, the prior person who directed the Disability Rights Project, she was no longer there, and she had done a great job with bringing all sorts of cases in the 90s related to people getting access for people in wheelchairs to public accommodations, employment discrimination, access for people with disabilities to the emergency management system, like 911 calls for deaf individuals. We had, deaf prisoners cases, all sorts of cases, housing discrimination. But when I got there, the project was kind of dwindling, and I wanted to develop it and grow it. And so I was able to help grow the project and bring a lot more litigation around issues related to blindness, like website and app accessibility and kiosk accessibility. And so that was like a new area of the law that we're growing, and we're trying to create more positive legal precedent in. So I was able to bring a diverse perspective and get more cases around that. We're also working on a case to make VoIP phones and a web conferencing platform, WebEx, accessible. That area is growing a lot. We're also trying to bring cases more to help low-income people with disabilities and intersections with disability and people of color and poverty and race. So that is, that's a diverse perspective that I'm bringing. And a lot of times people with disabilities have been fighting for accommodations in their own lives and advocating for themselves all throughout, their lives growing up, and finding creative solutions to get around for accommodating themselves and trying to think of creative solutions. And they can bring that to the workplace to bring to their work. They can also bring a diverse client base. Like I've been able to bring in a lot more clients with disabilities and a lot more clients who are dealing with all sorts of issues like I said, race, poverty, LGBT status, gender discrimination, all sorts of issues. And I've been able to teach my coworkers about best practices like making documents accessible, making sure our own website is accessible, making sure we have an accessible case management system. So, people with disabilities are able to really teach their own colleagues a lot about accessibility and just bring different perspectives to the team that they work with. So that was just wanted to get that started. So now we're going to jump to the questions for the panelists, and they're divided into 3 topics. Topic 1 is creating an inclusive environment. Inclusion for people with disabilities is not just one-dimensional. Just as there are many aspects of any business, there are many aspects of inclusion. 3 core aspects are attracting and recruiting persons with disabilities, including and enabling people with disabilities, and developing and advancing the growth and personal development of people with disabilities. So I wanted to turn to the first question. Eric, can you discuss attracting and recruiting persons with disabilities for your company?
Sure. Thank you, Deepa. So at AT&T, we have worked very hard to make sure that we engage with applicants who are disabled and make sure that we are able to accommodate our employees with disabilities in the workplace. And we really do that through a number of different aspects. One of them in particular is making sure that our application process is very accessible and accommodating. If you've not been there, I would encourage you to go out to att.jobs/no limits, and you can see the kind of experience and resources and insight that we give to applicants with disabilities so that they can explore the opportunities at AT&T, see what may be right for them, and apply for those jobs in the way that everyone else does. We do provide a way for them to directly indicate accommodations they may need in the application process, and those, of course, are individually handled so that their needs are met. We've also worked very hard, because of the general war for talent within the U.S. and globally, to create a very engaging employee brand that includes letting folks with disabilities know that AT&T is a company that really would be supportive of them. So of course we do that through the organizations that we partner with to do our recruiting. We do that with the sponsorships we provide for various events and organizations that are focused on people with disabilities and creating accessible environments and workplaces. And then of course we get seals of approval, like the recent DEI index we got, or the NOD employer seal that we just received, that really indicate to people that we do walk our talk when it comes to bringing folks into our workplace and getting that diverse perspective. And then I would tell you that we also have a very inclusive intake process. We normally think of bringing someone into the business simply through the post a job, make a hire, bring them on board. But another aspect of what we've been doing on the War for Talent, is we try to create a connection with potential employees very early on, I'll say, quote unquote, in their careers. And so through our internship program, we try to begin to have a relationship with people that we eventually want to bring on into the company. So we used to do that just with college seniors. We are now doing that with college freshmen. And one good example recently is that we partnered with Launchability in Dallas to do a pilot program to have a group of summer interns with autism work at AT&T. We got them, about 4 or 5 of them. We placed them in HR positions. We had a good experience for them. We had a workplace partner for each of them, gave them meaningful work to do, and really brought them on board as employees for the summer. And it worked very well. And in fact, we're already looking now to see how we can expand the program for the next internship cycle. So many, many things that we're doing to try to really live out our intent to be a diverse and inclusive workplace. And what I'd like to do very quickly to kind of bring all that together and really leverage to the point Deepa made about the diverse perspectives that all employees can bring is to show you a very quick video that you can actually find out there on the AT&T job site about how we've actually done this in a real case. And I think that usually speaks better than just a lot of words. So let me go ahead and show you the video.
My name is Kamal Nesser. I work here as a warehouse associate. Mostly I help in the warehouse, stocking, packing, and delivering items to technicians.
I didn't really know what to expect going into an interview with someone that's deaf. I felt leaving that interview that he was probably the best candidate for the job.
We have pretty good communication. Jason signs a little bit. I help him communicate. He's learning. If he doesn't know a sign, I write it, and I teach him a lot of the different signs.
Being that we're DirecTV and we have been going through a transition into the AT&T world, our regional safety manager, he brought the safety creed with him. So what I really wanted to do at that point was make it more team-oriented. I told them we are going to get on the computer with Kamal on some of the ASL websites that he has shown us, and we're gonna figure out every single one of these words and sign.
No job is so important.
No service
is so urgent that
I was just ecstatic. They wanted to learn sign language, all the members, all the staff, and we took the time to do it. And we learned it quickly. My self-esteem went way up.
And it was crazy. We started working on it and it got really fun and competitive. And by the end of the day, not only did we know the entire thing in sign, but we had it memorized as well. Before this experience, I had zero experience with anyone that has been deaf. And what Kamal has taught me is it's actually a lot easier to communicate with them than you may think.
I feel they've accepted me. AT&T accepts deaf people, like Jason knows what I do and that I can do it. Some companies think that deaf can't do anything, but AT&T has really picked it up and really has done a very nice job.
Maybe we just forget about what mainstream world around us is doing and really just focus on the individuals around us. Do what we know is right in our heart. Show some compassion.
So, Dan, can you explain how to help include and enable persons with disabilities?
Sure. Thanks, Deepa, for that question. So I'm fairly new to Accenture. I've been here like 3 months. So as I'm learning, it's been a really wonderful experience because I was able to kind of go through the onboarding process like you were talking about, Erica, how you really kind of include people from the onset. So I've been really able to kind of take a fresh look at what we do at Accenture and kind of see all the wonderful things. What I'd like to highlight, something for people to go out and take a look at as far as inclusion and engagement is concerned. We, Accenture just partnered with Center for Talent and Innovation on a research report called Disabilities and Inclusion. And it really focused on kind of white-collar, college-educated professionals in the workforce. Very comprehensive study. And they made some really I won't say profound, but they really highlighted some areas that companies can focus on to ensure that employees with disabilities are included and engaged in the workforce. Again, I think a lot of the research is reinforcing a lot of things that we already knew, but now we have the actual data and science to back it up. One of the areas, so they really broke it down into 3 distinct areas where companies can really operate in. The first one being kind of inclusive leadership. And what does that mean to a company? So every company up here has kind of what their tenets of what an inclusive leader looks like and feels like and what they do. Things like providing good and candid feedback, being able to credit others, creating an environment where employees feel okay to take a risk, where they're not so risk adverse that it kind of paralyzes them. Those types of inclusive leadership behaviors, and again, it's a little more detailed in the report. We definitely do programming where we try to instill inclusive leadership behaviors along the lines with emotional intelligence, bias training, kind of being able to figure out what your own personal biases are and that you're not holding them to employees that are different, even if it's a disability or any other difference that you may see. So really kind of thinking about what an inclusive leader means to your organization and how that manifests in what you want in that leadership traits and characteristics. The second piece that they really kind of pulled out was around disclosure training, and I'll broaden that out to not just disclosure training, but to kind of a disclosure competency. So like what Eric was talking about, that recruitment process, are your recruiters and hiring managers and HR staff versed in talking about self-ID and disclosure to potential candidates as they're coming in through the process, not in an effort to figure out if they have a disability, but to let them know we are disability inclusive and that we have to let people know that we have resources within the company through our accommodations process or other means to provide them the things that will enable them to be top performers in the workplace, right? So that's a little bit about what the organization should have around a competency level around disabilities and how to interact and know what the resources that are available to the employees are, so they can have those meaningful dialogues and conversations with employees. The third area really is around signals of support, right? So we want to make sure that our employees in the organization know that we are going to support them, because a lot of times, they may not come in with a disability, but if you ever heard that this is one segment within the diversity and inclusion field that everyone has a likelihood, especially in the U.S., of hitting, right? So if you don't have a disability now or hadn't had one in the past, just keep on living, right? So you'll wind up getting into this cohort one way or another, right? So how do you show signals of support, right? One is really have the support tools, have that infrastructure of an accommodation process that's robust. They can get the resources needed. That's easy to use. Don't make it so cumbersome and complicated that people just give up and don't want to go through the accommodation system. And make it well communicated. If it's out there and you have this wonderful tool but nobody knows about it and uses it, what good is it? So they're kind of the 3 best practices or rules to follow really about when you set up that accommodation process and make sure that you can get those resources to employees. Another area is really around having role models. Role modeling, executives and people in your senior management teams with disabilities. Our own, I'm actually sitting in for our chief legal counsel and for Accenture, who was going to be here, Chad Jurdy, who himself is an amputee. And we'll go out and talk about his condition, as well as we have other senior leadership that is open about their disability. I have another executive sponsor in India who's deaf in one ear and has diabetes, and they'll role model and say it's okay, and you can get to the senior level executive being a person with a disability within Accenture, right? So that's very important to show a pathway for people, because sometimes a previous company I had a conversation with this young lady that we offered a job to, and she happened to be in one of those diverse segments that we were trying to attract, and she turned down a job offer from us to go to another company, and we asked her why, and she said, well, I looked at your org charts and there was no one there like me, so I didn't feel like there was a path. So that's why it's so important to kind of role model that. Okay, and then the last aspect was really around establishing the community. Okay, making sure that persons with disabilities, employees with disabilities, have a community within the company. So the number one way to do that is establish employee resource groups, make sure they feel heard, provide them resources, and let them establish the community and what the mission is for that ERG aligned with the company, right? Accenture does have an employee resource group focused on persons with disabilities. It's global. There's about 6,000 members in that. On another front, we've also established a mental health allies program in 4 of our main countries around the globe. That's got over 7,000 allies, where they really focus in on mental health in the workplace, right? There's also an autism support group within the U.S. For employees with autism, as well as employees with loved ones with autism, children, spouse, and they just want to learn more about autism and support services, and then come together as a community. So there's a number of different ways to kind of build that community within your companies. They're just some of the things that Accenture does, and I know EY and AT&T has similar initiatives going on to kind of do that same thing, build that community. And I think that there's some, again, we could talk for days on this topic, but I think at a very basic level, there are some of the ways that you can really kind of interact, include, and engage employees with disabilities within your company or your organization.
Great, thank you. So we're going to pause because now we have the video working. So
okay. I was going to let's go to Lori, but all right, we'll go
we'll go to Lori after.
So it'll be a counterpoint to what's been done, and then we'll hear from Lori. Okay, now I'm having technical problems. Hold on. Nope, still no good.
No.
So, Lori.
Oh, we have tech support coming.
Wow, I've never been a backup. I need to turn this on.
I have a separate question for you, Lori.
Oh, okay.
Well, and you can talk about the others too, but we want to know about developing and advancing persons with disabilities. So how do you do that at Ernst & Young?
Yeah, I'm so eager to talk about that I was preempting the moderator here. Well, Dan, you did a terrific job of outlining what organizations can do to enable people with disabilities to feel included and be successful. The next step, which is a step that organizations sometimes don't get to, although our organizations are very focused on it because we're a little bit further along on our journey, is how you enable people with disabilities to grow professionally and to advance. And by advancement, I don't just mean getting promoted. It could be advancing to develop new skills and picking up new areas of responsibility and growing horizontally. But the key thing is that there's a lot of talk about how you retain people. I think our companies aren't satisfied with retaining people. We want people to move and to grow. And I think at EY, that comes down to kind of three things. One is setting expectations around feedback, development, and growth. Two is creating systems and processes and supports to enable that. And three is actually taking steps to build people's skills to be strategic about their own career development. We place a lot of focus when people are looking for jobs on career preparation and career readiness skills, how to interview, do a resume, etc. In order for people to really advance and tap their best abilities, we feel we need to place that same degree of focus on building the skill set to be able to plot how to advance one's career. So setting expectations, back to the first point, really begins with what you communicate to your workforce, and then how you enable that and hold them accountable for that. At Ernst & Young, we have a system where everybody in the firm at every level has a counselor. And a counselor is not a remedial position. A counselor is actually somebody who functions as your personal career coach. And sort of, I think of it as like a homeroom teacher. You keep that counselor for most of your career. And it's somebody who is a level above you in the organization, but who is your ally to help you map out. And you do this on a regular basis. This isn't just annual with performance review time. We've moved to a system now where, and this is new, we do this every 60 days. We take a pause and meet with our counselor, and we map out where it is we think we want to get to next, and what skills and experiences and connections we'll need to get there, and how we strategically plan together to fill those gaps. Everybody at the firm is also part of something we call counseling families. Counseling families are groups of individuals within the same functional area and geography who meet quarterly to discuss people issues, firm culture and people issues in a more kind of informal and personal setting. So it is a place where we can and do training around skills like high performance teaming, and one that's really critical to us, what we call gold standard feedback, how to give feedback that is really meaningful and impactful and is brave rather than safe. And I think you all know what I mean. There's a tendency on the part, and particularly with people with disabilities, this can be a real issue, with wanting to be overly kind and wanting to protect people and not giving them the really critical feedback they need to know where they need to improve. And that, of course, and I use this term in air quotes, handicaps folks, particularly folks with disabilities. So it's really important to have the expectation of giving honest, critical feedback, and then to know how to do it and to be held accountable for it. Another area is, I mentioned accountability. Everybody in the firm is rated on a regular basis on how they give feedback to their colleagues at all levels, including the superiors, and how they develop their peers. Everybody, even a staff member newly coming into the firm, is held accountable for giving feedback and helping develop others. And that sends a message, and we write each other on this. That sends a message that these are critical skills that you need to have to advance, and that the firm is really going to hold you accountable to that. And your advancement and your compensation and your reputation and everything depends on how well you do these things. We are also required, and I'm sure this is true of all our organizations, on a regular basis to create clear documented plans for learning, both formal learning and experiential learning. So part of how we are going to close that gap between kind of where we want to go and the skills and experiences we currently have. Something that is done in much of our organization that's, I gotta say, pretty cumbersome but pretty smart, is we have also been required to create relationship maps, planning who we need to know internally and externally and cultivate in order to gain the knowledge, gain the access, gain the experience, gain the skills, whatever it is we need to progress on our journey. And then the final thing I mentioned is building the skills, and we are very deliberate about that. We train people in how to give, again, what we call gold standard feedback. We also place quite a focus on mentors and sponsors. What a mentor is somebody who is really interested in your development and growth, and somebody who takes on that role voluntarily, usually because you ask. Sometimes they'll ask you, but usually as an individual, you need to find who you want as a mentor. And a sponsor is somebody who is in a position of influence, who goes to bat for you, who is a mentor on steroids. And everybody needs a mentor, and it is super helpful to have a sponsor. And this isn't true, obviously, just for people with disabilities, but people with disabilities often face particular challenges. I can think of an individual in our organization who just this summer was promoted to partner, a higher level. It's our highest level. It's a big deal, and accounting firm, it's like a law firm. And he's an individual who has a significant speech disfluency. When he is in high stress situations, he stutters. And as you can imagine, there's a lot, our people are client facing. Our people at the partner level do not sit in the office and just churn out work. They meet with the C-suite, and they have to be able to project credibility and establish themselves as experts pretty quickly, and communication style is one of the ways they do that. So as you can imagine, there would be a lot of concern about advancing. Nobody had any concern about this person's technical brilliance, and he's an incredibly personable individual. However, there would be concerns. So his counselor, somebody he tapped to be his mentor, sponsor, and we on the ability side got involved as a team to work with him, not on how he could change the speech disfluency, but how he could set expectations and develop relationships where this wouldn't undermine. In fact, he found when he developed some ways to set expectations with clients, that sharing that vulnerability enabled him to develop closer relationships with his clients more quickly, because he opened up to them, and some, including folks at really high levels, at the C-suite level, opened up to him. So We educate our people on how to develop a mentor, how to choose a mentor, what that means, the importance of a sponsor, and the same thing. The final piece of this is leveraging all the opportunities you have available to build your knowledge of the organization, build your knowledge of your subject matter, develop your leadership skills, and develop visibility internally and externally, because your external visibility has great currency and value internally in most organizations. And one of the chief ways to do that, and Dan mentioned this, is through your employee resource groups. So we're really deliberate in laying out, not that you want to join an employee resource group because you're building community, that's great. Or even because you're passionate about a subject area, that's great too. But we are really clear, and I talk to people in our employee resource groups about this all the time. You need to use this. You need to seek speaking opportunities, and we will help you do that where you get that better visibility. We need to figure out who you need to meet within EY and who would be good for you to meet in the community and in other employers to build your personal brand and develop an actual plan to do that. And if individuals are not going to really leverage employee resource groups in that way to advance, then it has much less value for the organization. Because our key goal, and I'll submit that the key goal of any top organization shouldn't be just to hire the best people and then keep them. It should be to hire the best people and then be really purposeful on how you help them develop and grow so that they can reach their fullest potential. That's how you leverage your investment in your people.
Thank you. That was really helpful. Thanks, everyone. So we're going to move to our second topic. This month's theme is Inclusion Drives Innovation. There are many different kinds of innovation, and innovation can occur in many different ways. Can each of you speak to what types of innovation you've seen that has been driven by diversity and inclusion of persons with disabilities? And I'm just going to open it to all three of you to talk about that.
I'll start. I would say that AT&T has a history of innovation that provides much more opportunity for inclusion for people with disabilities. It's really been a big part of our history. And one of the key things would be the Watson application that was developed in AT&T Labs. We don't have it any longer. We actually sold it to IBM. But that technology basically, created voice-enabled ways for various things to get done, and has been, elemental to a lot of different applications and tools that have served people who need to be able to use voice-activated assistance. So that's been key. But then one of the other things that we've done in the company is we've created an organization that we call CATO, and it's the Corporate Accessibility Technology Office, and they've actually been around since 2012. And what we do with CATO is we actually have all of our product development teams and all of our internal applications go through review with them to make sure that what's being designed, what's being built, what's being offered, both internally and externally, meets accessibility standards. And they have had, last year, as I recall, about 8,000 requests for review. They completed about 1,800 detailed accessibility evaluations. And the product and services team and the internal teams take that feedback and modify their plans to make sure that what they're developing and going to introduce is indeed fully accessible. So I'll give you an example. I mentioned the AT&T job site and the fact that we have, /no limits for applicants with disabilities to use. That whole site's been through a CATO review. And the way that it's designed is to make sure that on any device, through any application, it is fully accessible. I have had applications that I've developed in prior jobs where I suddenly got a call from the Cato office telling me that this internal application needed a few tweaks in order to make sure that it was accessible for employees. And it's been very, very successful to make sure that we're always being mindful of how the products we create and the applications we develop and use within the business are indeed inclusive of everyone.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
He's very kind. Thank you, Dan. I wanted to jump in because I wanted to change gears because my perspective is very different at Ernst & Young, being a professional services firm. Two examples of innovation that kind of really point to the same story. One points to how wanting to diversify workforce can lead to innovation in our service delivery models, in how we are able to deliver services to clients. And the other piece of it is how that innovation itself led to further innovation in our processes, which really has driven our productivity. So, Eric, you were talking about your internship for individuals with autism. We have a neurodiversity program, or initiative, I'd rather call it an initiative, where in order to leverage the technical talents of individuals with really good math and technology skills, we have set up what we call neurodiversity centers of excellence, where individuals with autism are specially sourced and trained and screened and onboarded and supported. And they work on the analytics. Sometimes that's number crunching and engagement economics, and sometimes that's robotic process automation in support of the work we do for clients. So rather than having all the work we do for clients go on the client side as part of the client serving team, certain aspects of that work, certain very time-consuming technical aspects of that work are sent back to a center of excellence, and we have individuals with autism who do just those range of tasks, do that work, and they do it very effectively and very efficiently. It's a way of better leveraging our talent because our folks that are dealing with clients and at client sites don't need to do everything. They can send back some of the most time-consuming, detail-oriented work and have specialists who happen to be specialists with autism doing that work. That's a much more efficient way for us to deliver our services. And we found it very successful, so much so that we piloted it in one office. Actually, the second office, we opened a Neurodiversity Center of Excellence in Dallas in June. And it's a model that we're expanding. We expect to open 2 Neurodiversity Center of Excellences. That's a hard thing to say. A year for the next 4 years. But one of the findings was that in itself, we all talk about how diversity, and in particular, diversity in abilities drives innovation, and we found that in spades within the first month of bringing in individuals with autism. One of the individuals was going through training in macros, computer macros, some of the kind of shortcuts for how we do time-consuming processes. And this training is standard throughout the firm. We have a couple 100 people in this role taking this training a year. And he took a look at the training and he said, if you know something about people with autism can be very, very honest, very straightforward. And he said, this really doesn't make sense. You need to sequence it this way. I don't know why you went to this step first. You should have gone to this step first. And this isn't really very clearly worded. And he had 3 or 4, quote, areas of improvement, unquote, that he pointed out to us. And our national trainer took a look at the suggestions he had. Now, we've been going through this macro training for a couple of years, and nobody had spoken up and said, this wasn't the most efficient way to do it. But he's very linear, logical, looked at things in a different way, and our national trainer said that his suggestions will cut our training time in half for everybody taking that training. That's across the organization. So the need to bring in diverse talent led us to an innovative way to change up our service delivery model that is more efficient, more effectively leverages our people resources, and then in turn it led to greater process innovation, which is driving productivity.
No, I'll be quick. And I think Accenture kind of, it's funny that the 3 of us are here because I think Accenture kind of cuts across like kind of technology development as well as consultant. And so what we found is getting in the space and really working on our internal systems on accessibility. We also established an accessibility council that's head up by 5 of our C-suite level executives, including our CIO, our Chief Procurement Officer, our Chief Human Resource Officer, Chief Legal. So there's a bunch of people, a lot of chiefs, to really, and that's how much we were concerned about this internally. And what we found out is as we were tackling these accessibility issues, we had a number of passionate people within our technology and our digital function that were working on accessibility within for client-facing organizations, right? So what we found out, we did some digging. About 5 years ago, they said the request for accessibility work to make tools and products and websites accessible was about maybe 20% of the work. Today, it's up to over 80% of what they're doing for products. So it's really turned into a profit and revenue generating as we're consulting with all these companies and working with Microsoft and SAP and Cisco on all of these different tools that they need to build in this accessibility. So we're also bringing in a lot more people with disabilities that really understand the space, and they're experts in creating accessible, and who better to help guide us and be users and testers. We're right now currently partnering with Microsoft on the new 365 online, where they've licensed out 10,000 licenses to Accenture for us to test accessibility with our employees. So it's really turning into not just this thing that we're doing for employees for better productivity, but it's also hitting our businesses in the profit arenas as well.
And one more thing that's sort of obvious, but I guess we haven't mentioned, is when you make products or services or facilities or anything accessible for people with disabilities, you generally improve the usability for everybody.
Absolutely.
And the example you've all probably heard everybody talks about is curb cuts. Most people don't curb cuts, in case you don't know the term, it's a rather weird term, are when a curb stops and levels out when you're crossing a street. And curb cuts were developed for people in wheelchairs and with other mobility issues, but how many of us, in my case, often dragging a computer bag or carrying things or wearing heels or uncomfortable shoes or is certainly carrying a cup of coffee will choose the curb cut. In fact, sometimes in some busy cities, there's almost a mad rush for who gets the place where there's a curb cut. Siri and other, the voice-activated systems on our iPhones were developed for people who are blind. It wasn't developed for everybody to use, but people like me who are really bad texters. I rely on dictating my text. And the same is true in the workplace. Many other examples. So when Dan talks about making tools and technologies accessible, yes, those help people with disabilities, but the clear, straightforward language, the usability, the kind of practicality benefits everybody.
Thanks. So we have one more topic, but before I do that, I was thinking maybe we can open it to the audience for a couple of questions. Is that Evan? Is that?
This one. There's a microphone. If you go to the microphone.
And just say your name and say your question.
Yeah, I'm Ken.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm Ken Lundberg. I happen to be on leave time, but I also happen to work at the Office of Apprenticeship in the Department of Labor, and I've heard mention of internships and mentoring. I'm wondering if you have any, or are considering any kind of formal apprenticeship programs where there'd be formal credentialing, for folks with disabilities and also just in general. It's popular in this administration. It was in the last one as well.
So I can start. So there's a couple ways to answer that. So it depends on the skill set you're looking for. So I would say in the U.S. where we're looking for more of the degreed, professional type of work, we have less of that, but we are looking at sort of like the technical certification side, where we can steer a lot of underrepresented communities into a like a cybersecurity certification or an IT certification, right? We have a program through our corporate citizenship called Skills to Succeed, where we have a goal of trying to hit about 3 million people in upskilling them to get them job ready. Whether it's, depending on where it is, and this program is global. So like in South Africa, we're trying to getting up to like entrepreneurship skills and provide those types of skills to underrepresented communities there. Here we're looking more at the IT cybersecurity certifications where we can kind of grow that part of our workspace. So it has to make sense in kind of the geographies we operate in and where we can set those up. But I think, like I said, we're at about 1.8 million people that we've gone through the Skills to Succeed program in Accenture with a goal of 3 million. So we're on our way, to say.
And so I would echo what Dan has shared for AT&T. It really is how you define the idea of apprenticeship. Mm-hmm. So certainly I've mentioned the college intern program that we have, and we have easily 2,000-3,000 interns every summer across the company who are able to participate in that. And there's nothing that prevents, students with disabilities to be a part of that, and of course the accommodation process we have for our employees is extended to them. And so as they're able to come in and be an intern 1, 2, 3 years in succession and have that be a pathway to employment, that would be a type of apprenticeship that we have. And then in terms of special credentialing, we tend to do a lot of that, I'll say, outside of the company. So we would channel, very similar to what Dan described, we would channel folks, particularly folks maybe from non-traditional backgrounds, to our, say, the nano-degree programs we run with Udacity in order to get them skills that we find are going to be very hireable in the future. And again, the delivery of that training is very accessible. A lot of it's online, a lot of it is done at the person's own pace. It's done with resources that are fully accessible. So again, it gets them skilled to just come in like any other applicant to be considered for these opportunities going forward. We don't do so much where you come in sort of I'll say interim status and as an apprentice. If you make it, you're permanent. If you don't, you're let go. That's not quite our model. It's usually something where you're given the opportunity to work temporarily, or you're given the tools to channel you into one of our hiring avenues.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'll just kind of echo what both Dan and Eric said. The accounting profession describes itself traditionally as an apprenticeship model. That's how it works, very similar to a law firm where you come in and you build skills in a very deliberate way, and you are expected to progress in those skills and in the kinds of experiences you have, as you grow, and you are expected to grow throughout your career. And as with AT&T and Accenture, we have quite a large internship program. Most of our people are brought in through our internship program. I think in the U.S. we have some, perhaps 6,000, if I'm remembering correctly, interns brought in a year, and summer interns, and we expect them to be with us, just as you said, Eric, for several years, with the expectation of hire. We invest a lot in those interns and giving them, they don't just come in and learn a specific area, they are moved to during the summer, they experience different areas of the firm so that they begin to make contacts and know better how the firm operates even while they build their technical skills. And we have very proactive efforts to reach out to students with disabilities for those programs. So there's an internship program called the Emerging Leaders Internship Program, specifically for college students with disabilities that we participate in. We work with several autism organizations that work specifically with young people in and out of school on the spectrum, and try to qualify them for our internship programs. We have a lot of efforts to reach out to disability services offices at colleges, and we've developed some kind of innovative programs on how to engage with students directly there. So kind of that's the main way in which we approach something like an internship. But there are a few ways in which we're expanding that, and one is the Neurodiversity Initiative. When we hire people into the Neurodiversity Center of Excellence, it's for full-time permanent work, and they are paid on the same scale as anybody doing that job, and it's a pretty highly placed professional job. This isn't an administrative kind of entry-level role. But those individuals get, and I think you mentioned it, Eric, I think you mentioned it, they have buddies, they have a coach, there is a very customized training program for them, and a system of supports that's very close to apprenticeship, although it's permanent, full-time, and paid just like any other EY job would be.
Just one more question.
Okay, one more question.
How do you turn this off?
I think it's a button on the bottom.
That's
Good question.
You got your question.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one question. I sincerely want to thank you all for coming here and telling us about your companies. It's really heartening to hear what the private sector is doing to help people who are disabled. That being said, most people with disabilities aren't on the autism spectrum. It's kind of discouraging, when you hear this is the passage of the American Disability Act in 1991, the poverty rate and the unemployment rate for persons with disabilities is in fact skyrocketed. We have the highest poverty and the highest unemployment rate imaginable. You prove yourself to be thought leaders in the community. What's next to reach out to people who maybe not traditionally regarded as disabled? I know I don't present as a disabled person, but I'm not going to go into the background. But it's there. I get challenged on it quite frequently, and people generally see my credentials. My credentials are usually used against me, very blunt. What's next beyond neurodiversity? full
Yeah,
development
yeah.
of talent out there.
So that actually ties into the third topic we were going to cover, which was inclusion efforts covering the spectrum of disability, like intellectually and developmental disabilities, sensory, mobility, and people with mental illness and invisible disabilities. So maybe you can all talk about
So
that.
I'll start. So your point is well taken, and I would tell you that while neurodiversity is sort of the big new thing, and that's why you hear a lot about it, at AT&T certainly in the past what we've done is it's funny, but traditional disabilities are the ones that we're really focused on. So as we had employees who had visual impairments, as we had employees who had mobility issues, as we had employees who were deaf, we really worked hard, especially through the regulation provided by the ADA, to provide them accommodations that were appropriate. And we spent a lot of the time educating supervisors and business leaders that these accommodations are not expensive. They're very simple things, and they're things that a lot of employees ask for in order to do their jobs well. And so I would tell you that at least within the company, employees who were willing to come forward and self-identify were given every opportunity to excel. And I can't think of a single case where I heard an employee had to leave the company because they weren't appropriately accommodated. Now, when you get into the community that you described that are living in poverty, for us, a lot of it's going to be the nature of the work that's done. We have work that's, I'll say, fairly complex. We have work that's it's sort of a higher order skill set for entry-level jobs, and it's not necessarily the kind of work you may find in a manufacturing or fulfillment environment that can meet really limited areas of ability where some people can still perform and still make a living at that. We would really rely on our suppliers to provide those sorts of opportunities, and we hold our suppliers accountable for their own diversity programs and the way that they're subcontracting work to other vendors that really shows that they've made a commitment to diversity as well. So I would tell you that, given the nature of the work that we perform at our company, both occupational and professional, we've been pretty successful in accommodating everyone who has come forward that way. I think the opportunity continues to be to see how you can, through our work in the community, let other people know that there's more opportunity to them than they might realize, and get them in touch with the right resources to begin to enable them more and more. Because I was thinking about what Lori said and what Dan said. One of the biggest issues I have at AT&T is the fact that we have a robust framework to accommodate employees, and I am surprised at the number of employees that aren't aware of it. I had a personal friend who I found out was having difficulty at work, and when her partner told me what was going on, I said, well, okay, it sounds like what you're describing is the fact that she's dyslexic and she hasn't told her bosses. Well, that's absolutely right, but she won't self-identify. And so I had a conversation with my friend, and I said, why? You have every right to self-identify and ask for an accommodation. She finally decided that she would get over her idea that there's a stigma associated with it, did that, and then of course came back to me and said that her working relationship with her boss completely improved because now he understood why, working in the tax department, she wasn't exactly as accurate as she could have been, and made accommodations for her to really be able to do well. And so for us, a lot of it is getting our own employees to realize that we're there for them, and they just need to raise their hand and make it very clear that they have a need that needs to be fulfilled if they're going to be completely successful. And it's no different from the need that, say, a working parent has for flex time because of childcare issues, or employees who are taking care of parents and need time off for their issues, need to telework in order to accommodate doctor's appointments. It's all the same, and we really need to make sure that employees know that.
I'd echo kind of what Eric's saying. I think the traditional disabilities, especially the physical disabilities, we probably have a good handle on how to accommodate. I think most organizations are having a little more difficulty with those hidden disabilities, especially if our employees aren't letting us know, right? So in order for us to kind of accommodate and help and support, we need to know. So that's why there's a lot of effort around self-ID campaigns and awareness. So yeah, if we don't know that you have a need, you're not going to get your need fulfilled. So a big thing, and most companies are on this journey now around mental health. I believe last year was the thing on mental health, to really talk about it, because that is really still stigmatized within the workplace. If you talk about a mental health condition, people kind of tense up, right? So how can we destigmatize that and have more open conversations about that? Accenture just, October 10th was actually World Mental Health Day that the World Health Organization kind of established. And we had huge campaigns, and they're ongoing. It's not just on that day, but we make sure we have, I talked about a Mental Health Allies program. We also kind of do employee testimonials where I have a senior leader that shot a video for us that we're playing all throughout the company, who had a breakdown within work because of the work stress and family stress, and for him to come talk about it and his recovery and that time, and then how Accenture supported him through that, where he wasn't in fear of losing his job during this time, this hard time that he was going through, that we were there to support him. So the more we can kind of get those stories out and talk about our resources and communicate it, I think will help people understand and feel more comfortable coming out. But again, it's a learning curve, right? So our leadership has to get a little more comfortable about engaging in those conversations and understanding they don't have to be the mental health expert, but they should at least know where the resources are within the company lies.
The other thing I would emphasize too is that deeper reach that you're talking about. We actually put some of that responsibility on our employee resource groups. So our employee resource groups at AT&T in the U.S. are actually nonprofit organizations. They're established as 501c3s. They're independent organizations, even though they work as auxiliaries of our company. And we require them to have a charter that's focused on three elements. One is certainly the professional development of their members. One is to support company objectives, but also community outreach and community work. And that's where we encourage them to go and work in the community and make people aware of the resources that AT&T has available, and simply through volunteerism. And so our organization, Ideal for Employees with Disabilities, will have those kind of community information sessions. We'll work with people to help them use the tools and products we have that may enable their life a little bit more. And all of our ERGs have really done that sort of work, and that's another opportunity to get that deeper reach that you've mentioned.
I'd like to add a couple of things. One is in terms of attracting people with diverse abilities. A big piece of it that we talked about is storytelling, not just storytelling internally, but sharing those stories externally. So about 4 years ago, we introduced new branding standards and had new recruiting materials in conjunction with that. And we're shooting a new recruiting video, featured 5 different people, different demographics, functions, ranks within the firm, just talking about their career journeys. One of the individuals who was featured is a wheelchair user. He didn't talk about being a wheelchair user. It was just very evident. He talked about his career journey. The next year, we developed a new program with LinkedIn where we put videos through the LinkedIn site. And the very first individual who we shot a video was a young man who, after working with us for about a year and a half, had a spinal cord injury and uses a wheelchair. It's really quite a dramatic story. He's now working with us half-time while he trains full-time for the U.S. Paralympic cycling team. He's living in Colorado Springs with them training, and we've changed his job. He's changed his job now twice to accommodate his training schedule. He was not a cyclist before. He picked this up after his injury. But he shot a video, and we could have had any videos out there. That's what we wanted to project. When we introduced the new branding standards, we did it with a billboard in Times Square. Our America's headquarters is right in the heart of Times Square, and that billboard featured 4 of our people with disabilities. 1 non-visible, 3 apparent disabilities. And the message was around diverse abilities and how leveraging the talents of people with diverse abilities help us build a better working world. So the messages and the stories are a way to reach out, and to the point of mental illness, we have quite an extensive mental illness education and awareness program introduced last year called Are You OK?, which aims to educate our people to recognize signs that others may be struggling with the impacts of their own or friends or family members' mental illness or addiction issues, and not to intervene, but to have a supportive conversation. And to be able to refer to expert resources, a sort of very junior level of the Allies program. But what I'm getting to is not that we have the program. One of the tools in the program is a video that is very, very quick, and it's a very stripped down how-to. What to look for, how to get ready to have a conversation, how to have a conversation, what to say, what not to say, where to refer. And it was shot with people from our resource network because we wanted it very colleague to colleague. We not only use it in our live education programs, and we've had 2,200 people in the US go through those live education programs, but we put it up on our website. We put it up so that anybody who's looking at EY and what kind of a culture we have sees that this is an area of focus and gets the message that this is a real priority and therefore likely to be a supportive culture. In terms of recruiting, we did one step better. We aligned with an organization called the DMAX Foundation, which sets up clubs on college campuses for students to support students around mental illness and addiction issues, to kind of form supportive communities. And one of those clubs was at Penn State, a school that we recruit from quite heavily. So we included the student officers of that club in one of our recruiting events, and we spoke about our internal Are You OK? Program and made kind of a connection between what we're doing at EY and what they're seeking to do on college campuses. That sends a very strong message to students at that school that this is a culture that takes supporting its people of all abilities quite seriously. So those are some of the ways that you reach out.
She's got the mic, this one.
With regard to having internships for college students,
Nice job.
with regard to, the internships for college students, has there been a lot done about going to communities and high schools and letting people know before they go to college, particularly people with disabilities, that you all do complex work and there are skills you can build and courses you can take to, if they're interested in this area, to then apply for those internships and have a career path?
So I'll start because we do that, and we actually call it our Aspire program. And so, we don't do a lot of hiring, any hiring for anyone who's, younger than 18. But we do try to show young people, high school students, that there are career opportunities for them that they may not have considered. And we try to show it to them early because those are often career opportunities. They're going to take a little investment in education that they may not have considered, and we want to show them what's at the end of that road. So we have employees who volunteer around the nation to go out into high schools. They go directly to the schools, or we bring the students into our work centers, and we show them this is what it's like to work at AT&T. These are the kind of cool jobs you can have. This is the kind of technology you're going to work with. And oh, by the way, if you think you want to do this, this is the kind of education and training it's going to take to do that, and start putting it on their minds that they may need to think a little bit differently about what they're going to do next after high school if that's their long-term goal. And then, of course, we show them how they can find resources to get themselves there through. So a lot of our aspiring is not just making these students aware of the possibilities. We provide mentoring to them. We have scholarship programs that our ERGs offer. Just a number of different ways to help them make that bridge that they might not normally make, given the family backgrounds they have or the communities they live in.
I'd second that, and we have pretty much similar programs going on at Accenture. I'd like to talk a little bit about my former company, Northrop Grumman, who was very interested in STEM and STEM education for underrepresented communities, right? So they actually saw and worked with National Science Foundation to see if you don't get them into certain levels of math by the middle school age, right, that the likelihood of them succeeding in those degrees once they get to college, it diminishes quite drastically. So we actually started at Northrop Grumman when I was there, working at the elementary and middle school level, more so to expose them to engineering and engineering degrees and science and technology fields, to get them started there, to plant that seed and work with parents. We would actually we would have middle school night where it would be a science and engineering night where the students would go off and do an activity, and we would actually sit there and talk to their parents and help guide them to guide their children into these fields. So it's something I believe most of the corporations are kind of taking a look at. We wish we'd have a little more support from the federal government side on developing those programs and supporting those programs. But it's something that we see as really one of our biggest risks, is that talent gap of not having that talent in the future to draw from. Because right now, I mean, we put out a goal of being 50% women by 2025 globally, and if we're only producing 20 to 25% women in technology right now, there's no way we can get there. Right? So we definitely need some help on the policy side as well as kind of the corporate engagement side.
Echoing yet again the kind of two specific initiatives we have along those lines that are a little bit different. We often have partnerships with school systems, and that's on an office basis or on a regional basis. In this area, and I can't remember the name of the school that we partner with, but we have interns from a high school coming in, working with us on a regular basis. And in New York, we have a partnership with the New York City Public School System, where we have students from what they call their career academies, which are essentially obviously part traditional education, but they get vocational experience as well. And about 20% of their population in the career academies are students with disabilities, they tell us. And we have those students come in on a regular basis for career exploration sessions. We hire some of those students as interns, particularly in the technology area. Some of those interns have been hired full-time, but it's a way for them to get exposure, to learn about what it takes to have a career, not only in financial services, but in other areas of our firm, in marketing and in communications at all. We also have quite a large program called College MAP, where we mentor high school students starting freshman year. It's a one-on-one relationship where one of our people mentors one student throughout their high school years, guiding them on classes to take, encouraging them, and helping them know what scholarships to apply for and in order to be able to finance college, and then advise them on where to apply. So there are several programs where we're reaching out directly, and not just in the STEM area, and in all areas to high school students.
Great. So we are almost out of time, but I wanted to see if anyone in the Chicago office had questions. Just say your name. Okay. So,
not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think with that, unless there's any more questions in the audience, we're going to end the panel. I wanted to thank all the panelists for coming out and giving great advice, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you.